So, okay. No mai hari mai ki a koutou katoa, a ko Karen Driver tēnei. He tūao aho mō te Nelson Tasman Climate Forum. My name is Karen Driver. I'm a volunteer with the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum, and I, as part of the What We Make, Buy and Waste group. So I'll get into it and just share my screen. Oh, share. Right, and slideshow. Okay, so hopefully you're in the right hui. And so yeah, we're just talking about waste, and talking to Karen Lee in many of our conversations. We both know that a lot of people are really confused about what to do with waste, what the issues are, and how it relates to climate change as well. So this is the presentation, and I really very grateful to Karen and to David Stevenson for joining us today. So I'll start with a karakia. You can join in if you like. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. And so I'll do some quick introductions, and then I'll let you listen to the experts, and it'll be much more interesting than what I'm going to say, and with the presentation, and then we'll have some question and answers. So yeah, if you can hold on to your questions until that session, at the end, that would be great. So I'd like to welcome our two speakers. We've got Karen Lee. Actually, I'll stop sharing now so you can see me. We've got Karen Lee and David Stevenson. So Karen Lee is the Environmental Programs Advisor at Nelson City Council. And for the Rethink Waste Whakaaro here. Karen says that considering climate change is a core part of the work she does at Council, and waste has an important role to play in how we reduce emissions as a region. Councils have a role to play not only because of owning and operating our landfill, but because they can provide support and tools for the community to lead change. These tools range from grants through to funding EnviroSchools, and Karen is looking forward to talking to you about how waste works and what we can all do to make a difference. Our second speaker will be David Stevenson. David is the team leader for stormwater, rivers and waste at Tasman District Council. He's worked in waste management for over 15 years, and most of that time I've worked with him as well, so we know each other well. And he says that he sees some real opportunities in the coming years to change the way we manage our resources and waste. David sees the biggest challenge, but also the biggest reward will be getting our business community on board with waste reduction. So welcome to you, and I'll pass over to Karen. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Kia ora koutou, ko Karen Lee toki ingoa, no ingangi aho, I nai e no hoa. Ana ho ki wai mea, I te wai punamu. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā kono, tēnā tātou katoa. So hello everyone, I'm Karen Lee. Originally from England, now a resident here for many, many years, and I've been working with the council since roughly 2008, mainly on sustainability and waste, with a brief foray into climate change. So really, really pleased to be here. The presentation we're going to share tonight came about because we're contacted by many groups, businesses, individuals wanting to know what they can do and to make a difference of waste. And what we realized fairly quickly was that many people don't actually know how waste works in our region. So we put together a brief presentation, which we hope is as informative as possible, to just give some background for all these conversations. So I'm going to just run through that first. David and I are actually a double act. It's not so much we're splitting this, but doing separate parts as hopefully just answering questions and joining in as we go. So I'll start off with this presentation, which is, hold on, let me just get the share screen going. There. Just confirming you can all see that?
No.
No? Okay, that was a fail. I'll go back and do it again. You would think after all this time we've been using this technology, we'd get it right first go.
Bingo.
Bye-bye. Okay, so this presentation is very originally titled, What Happens to My Rubbish and Recycling? And it has both council logos on because, as probably most of you know, we actually share a joint waste management and minimisation plan, which is quite a mouthful. So we tend to refer to it just as the waste plan. Everything we do, the starting point for our plan and all the activities we put together is the waste hierarchy, which again, I'll assume everybody is familiar with. But it's a really key part of how we all need to think. And currently we have a target of 10% waste reduction by 2030, but the plan is coming up for review. So there's going to be a wide range of community conversations around what our future for waste looks like. And David will speak about that after me. So first of all, what happens to our waste? One of the common perceptions is that council collects waste. We don't. All waste in the region is collected by commercial service providers and usually travels straight to landfill. And I'll come on to our waste composition in a little while because there are many, many lost opportunities in this space. Both councils also operate resource recovery centres, or in Nelson's case, it's called a waste recovery centre, or you may know it as a transfer station. So household waste and smaller quantities go there. And there we have an opportunity to capture and separate out and recover resources. Curbside recycling, council operates a curbside recycling collection service. And that basically goes to what we call the MRF, or the Recycling Centre in Richmond. It's one of the busiest in the country. And again, I'll share some stats with you a little further on. And then, of course, there are also green waste options. You can drop green waste off at the transfer stations. There are also commercial service providers, and there are compost service providers, as we know. So waste per head of population. Sadly for us, New Zealand's one of the highest waste creators in the OECD. This table has got purple for New Zealand and green for Nelson Tasman. Looking at the figures, we're currently sitting at 682 kilos per capita per year. Encouragingly, strange as it may seem, we've got the blip there from COVID. We're holding course, we're not going up, we're starting more to go down. But there is an awful long way to go, as you can see from that. So the only way really basically is up, not in waste, but up in progress. The councils operate resource recovery, waste recovery centres across the whole region. And we also own 2 landfills, York Valley, which is the operative landfill, and Ease Valley, which is currently closed. Now, these landfills are owned jointly by both councils and run by a separate business unit. So the waste plan that David and I work to deliver doesn't oversee the landfills, but obviously there's really close collaboration between those 2 activities. Some pictures of the landfill, just to give you a little bit of a feel for what's involved. This is York Valley. If you don't know where it is, you'd be hard put to see it. It's hidden in Bishopdale, quite close in actual fact to the residential area. It's huge, as you can see. Waste goes in multiple layers, which are capped. There's a huge amount of infrastructure and movement involved in actually maintaining this landfill. It's got about 8 years life left. Is that right, David?
Yeah, give or take. Yeah, in that order. Yep.
This is the infrastructure which is installed to capture methane. which, as you probably know, is sold to Nelson Hospital to run the boilers. And the landfill business unit is looking at other options as well to use methane captured from landfill. What isn't used is flared. So it's quite a complex operation. And the business unit is also installing equipment to capture methane from the closed landfill, East Valley. And whilst there's no requirement to do that under carbon management, for us, that's just being good guardians of our region.
I wonder if I could just chip in with something there, Karen, unless it's a bit later on the presentation. So there's been quite a lot of change up at the 2 landfills in the last 12 months or so, and with the gas collection system. And part of that's optimising the way it's collected and the way it's dealt with as well. So the methane production's increased a lot in the last few years since we've been taking waste from both councils there. And as Karen said, some of that goes to the hospital and it's used to heat water and steam in the hospital instead of coal, which is great news. But there is a surplus, and one of the things the business unit's been working on is finding a better way to use that surplus gas. And the interim step is to be put in a much better flare, and the point behind that is to properly, fully combust that methane so that it becomes carbon dioxide, which means it's got a much smaller greenhouse gas impact than methane. And they've managed to take the old flare from York Valley and take it out to our closed landfill, and we're making some progress there too, which is really good news.
It is. It is. So there's a lot of work in hand there. The other technology that's being installed in the landfill is infrared cameras. And the reason for that is part of our make, take and consume society revolves around personal electronics and lithium-ion batteries in particular. These are a huge fire risk. You've probably heard stories of landfills catching fire. It's not a scenario we want to engage in. So infrared technology is used to capture hotspots. And also we're running a campaign you may have seen called Don't Bin Batteries, where we're really working with the community to encourage people not to put batteries in bins or recycling bins. And anecdotally, we are seeing at the moment a decrease in fires. So we do think the community are doing their part to start diverting those batteries. I mean, they're such valuable resources as well, even apart from the safety aspect of it. So what goes to the landfill? This is just about to be updated because every couple of years or so, we do something called a swap. Can you remember what the swap stands for, David?
Solid Waste Analysis Protocol.
Yay. I had a complete mental blank there. Thanks. And so basically the one that was conducted in 2020 told us that timber makes up 29%, rubble 15%. Both of those could be somewhere else other than landfill, particularly timber. Garden and food waste, again, that really shouldn't be such a high proportion of waste in landfill. And we'll talk about what the government's proposing and what we're thinking about later on in this presentation. Paper and cardboard, it could be recycled, plastic as well. And again, there's some really exciting stuff being proposed by government, which could make a difference in this respect. Where does landfill waste come from? So you may remember David said in his introduction that he truly believes that tackling commercial waste is a priority for us. And here's a conundrum for council, because the areas we can most influence tend to be domestic. And yet here we are, we have a whopping 48% in our landfill of commercial and industrial waste. So this is really a huge challenge that needs to be tackled. Curbside waste, collection and residential, 37%. Construction and demolition accounts for 7% on this. Right. So what are we finding in the average rubbish bin? And again, these stats are a little bit out of date, but very interesting. So look at that, garden clippings and food scraps. Finding better alternatives, better ways of both reducing, because by far the best option for taking action on climate change is actually not to create the waste in the first place. So all these things, these contents in rubbish bins are things really that we need to be finding ways to keep out of rubbish bins.
And if you look across the bottom half of the pie chart there, Karen, those four that make up half, they're all really sort of emission-rich products. So your garden clippings.
Absolutely.
So almost half of what's going to landfill are really high-emitting items that we're putting in our rubbish bins.
That's right. And in recycling, now this is done by weight, so not surprisingly, glass makes up by far the biggest proportion. Paper and cardboard is a big percentage. Plastics, because this is done by weight rather than volume, looks relatively small. And then the other items, 35 kilos per person per annum. Oh, that's interesting, David. We've actually got 35 kilos. Oh, it's 35 kilos per glass per person per annum and 33 kilos of mixed recycling. Okay, this is the MRF, the Materials Recovery Facility, or you might think of it as the recycling centre. Now, this is one of the busiest in New Zealand. It accepts vast quantities of materials. It handles all the recycling collected in Nelson and Tasman. And it's a mix of some really advanced technology and people power. And again, David might want to speak to this. I'll go to the next slide, and you might want to describe a little bit about the process, David.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so this is a photo inside the MRF. We've had it for about 7 years now. So we've got, this is where the product comes out of the MRF, and you've got some baled paper and cardboard there that's coming out of a compactor. And in the background there, you've got some, you've got the cages where the plastics and cans and things are sorted. So waste comes in from recycling, comes in from the other end of the shed, goes through a bunch of equipment that sorts and shuffles and throws materials around. And then there's a mixture of some pretty smart tech that photographs everything and sorts it, and some people that do quality assurance on the product. So there's about 7 people working there every day.
And so one of the reasons, for example, that in our recycling guidelines, we suggest it's best not to squash too much cans and bottles, is that it's super clever technology that recognizes things that are flat as paper and cardboard. So, yeah. Okay, so what can go in our recycling? Again, I'm assuming most of you know this, so I'm not going to spend much time here, but it's pretty standard, and we are hoping this is going to be standardized across the country. And again, we'll be talking about that a little bit more when we come to government action. Plastic recycling. So 2 years ago, we chose to only accept certain grades of plastic. Those are plastics 1, 2, and 5. The starting point for that is that there are markets in New Zealand for this plastic. And by really focusing and working with everyone to only do plastics 1, 2, and 5, it means, and to clean it, and to take lids off, we're actually collecting materials that we can have far more confidence can be recycled, which is so important, because why go to the trouble of collecting recycling if you actually can't recover it? And again, as always, behind this is the need to actually create less of this rather than just capture it and recycle it.
Now, I'm not sure if I sort of gave you an update on this, Karen, but probably a couple of months ago, government passed some regulations, which probably slipped under the radar for most people, but I think it's by October this year, or perhaps early next year, they're prohibiting sale of food in polystyrene containers, for instance, and moving into those top 3 plastics, which are much easier to recycle. So we're seeing a bit of progress there, which is good.
Yes, the government's running in parallel a programme of phasing out hard to recycle plastics, and the next tranche comes in October, which also includes things like fruit stickers and a range of other items as well. So it's a rolling programme from the government, because the idea is to enable, or rather to strongly encourage manufacturers, retailers, distributors to put their products at least into packaging that can be recycled. And again, recycling is a long way down the waste hierarchy. So where does our recycling go? So as of June 22, this is what was happening with our recycling. Glass going to Auckland. Mixed paper. We have capacity in New Zealand down as far as about Taupo to process paper and cardboard onshore. So after that, it gets baled and typically is shipped overseas. It's a clean and easy product we can be confident is going to be recovered. Tin and aluminium cans, they're baled and sold within New Zealand. They're often processed offshore. Again, this is about capacity. Plastics 1, 2 and 5 up until now have been processed at organisations like PACT in Wellington and Comsback in Christchurch. There is going to come a point where the markets in New Zealand are going to run out of capacity to recycle plastic on shore. And then you're facing some very hard choices. Do you just not get it recycled? Or do you then look for other places that can recycle it, providing really good quality product that you know is actually going to get recycled? So there's some tough conversations coming up in this space. David, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I guess it's just been what we've seen is a lot of movement in packaging in the last 2 years. Particularly things like meat trays. A couple of years ago, if you're buying your meat in the supermarket, it probably came on a polystyrene tray. Well, that's all switched to clear PET now. So the material that can be recycled has really increased significantly, and more councils are able to. So pretty much all the PET capacity in New Zealand is spoken for now. So I guess it's a question about whether or not industry will be investing in more processing capacity, or maybe whether government will be supporting them to invest as well. So we're kind of watching the space with interest, really.
But we also need to get away from recycling to models like reuse. I mean, that's going to take longer, sure. But actually reducing quantities has got to be part of this conversation. So what councils are doing? A range of engagement programs. We collaborate through the Joint Waste Management and Minimisation Plan. We provide our curbside recycling collections, green waste services, street litter management. This one was written for Nelson, sorry David, so I've only got our recovery centre on there with a spelling mistake no less as well, never mind. Then we do things like provide grants. We've put a lot of effort into activities like supporting repair cafes, Secondhand Sunday, support for composting at home. Food waste processing is going to change, but that's not going to take away the need for us all to understand how to manage food waste, and preferably actually avoid creating it in the first place. Supporting diversion of construction and demolition waste, that's a work in progress. Supporting Enviro schools, that's really important. Advocacy at regional and national level. This takes a huge amount of our time, but it's too important not to invest the time. The government, as you know, have brought out some very chunky submissions recently, consultations, and they're proposing some really ambitious changes. So it's really important that our voices are heard in that. Planning for investment in the future. The Waste Minimisation Fund, which is run by the government and funded through the waste levy, which is collected, there's a cost per tonne of waste that is paid as a waste levy. That cost is going up. The revenue from that is going to provide more funding for a range of activities, particularly through the Waste Minimisation Fund. The Waste Minimisation Fund, I should mention as well, is changing its format for those who are interested. Up until now, we're familiar with the very cumbersome beast that opened in May, had a hugely complicated process for applying for, closed far too quickly to actually manage to get your application sorted, and then took a huge amount of time to actually be able to engage with the project. What we're getting now is a waste minimisation fund that will open, we believe, October and November, will be open until funding is used up, and we're promised will be more streamlined. So watch this space. So investment for the future is going to be about council, about government funding, government legislation, partnerships, some really important things that need to happen. And then supporting council walking the talk and waste minimisation at events and a whole range of other day-to-day activities that really matter if we're going to support new norms in our community. What central government is doing, they have a really ambitious programme underway. So I'm sure you're all familiar with the consultation that has been out recently about, they've called it standardising recycling, but it's more about transforming our waste system. So they're looking at a container return scheme, standardising curbside recycling, mandatory food waste collections for households, mandatory food waste separation for business, although that's still quite undefined. We don't really know what that looks like or what that's going to mean. But basically providing a huge amount of opportunity, not only for central government, but also local government and community to create change. Implementing product stewardship. The tyre product stewardship scheme is the first one off the ranks. I'm sure everyone's familiar with product stewardship, where the responsibility goes to the manufacturers, distributors, rather than the users and the payers of waste services necessarily. We're waiting with great interest for the next ones around electronic waste and batteries. And then updating the New Zealand waste strategy. We're hoping that is going to be out in September. And there's a whole raft of proposed legislation changes that may again be quite a game changer. Things like duty of care legislation. So we're just waiting with great interest to see what that's going to look like and how it's going to work. So what you can do, and again, you are already very much ahead of the game. When community groups ask us what they can do, we put up as many ideas as we can, because it's people in the community taking actions, sharing ideas, modeling what they're doing, who make the difference. So again, these are all the things that you will be very aware of, and it's the life that you already live through your membership in the forum. But I would just refer back to something that was said by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is that the source of all of this is our make, take, waste culture, and the emissions that you can associate with that make, take, and waste. I mean, they are suggesting could be roundabout. You could actually associate that with 45% of climate change emissions. I don't know how they measure that, but I don't disagree. So as a council, it's not for us, it's not just about managing landfills. It's about doing everything we can to enable and be good partners and collaborate so that we can all reduce our waste and reduce our emissions. So that's the end of the presentation. We do a newsletter, just putting a little plug in for it now. We're always happy to have suggestions and feedback. Karen will share David's and my email. And we're happy to share the presentation if it's wanted as well. So over to everyone else.
Right, we've got a few questions on the chat, I think. Karen?
Right, okay, let's have a look.
So the first one's from Lindsay around the MRF. Why is it so busy, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? Bit of a mixture, I'd say, Lindsay. It's probably one of the busiest in the country, but it's certainly not the biggest. So there are some really big ones in Auckland and Christchurch and Wellington. But because we're pooling the two regions, it's pretty busy, and we're probably reaching capacity at the moment. So it's I mean, this is a bit of a debate we have amongst ourselves all the time, that this recycling is certainly not the solution by any means. It's one step up the hierarchy, but it's just one step. But sometimes it's the first step that people need to make. So yeah, we have seen one of the things we've talked about before is that we have increased the amount we're diverting from landfill through the recycling, but one of the problems is that we're frantically producing more at the same time. So it means that there's still a lot going to landfill, because while we're recycling more, we're producing and using more too. So I guess in the perfect world, the MRF would go out of business, but in the meantime, the world's not perfect.
Thanks, David. I'll take the next question. So Kendra has asked, are there linkages to the Sustainable Business Network around the ways and organisations engaged in reducing commercial waste streams? Could we actively promote those that are intentionally reducing waste? And yes, of course, absolutely. So Council funds Business for Climate Action. I'm assuming everyone's aware of that group, who are working really actively with the business sector, and who do connect to a Sustainable Business Network and work to enable and promote as much as possible actions taken by business. As a council, we promote as much as we can, but to a certain extent, we're an echo chamber, which is why we put our efforts into resourcing groups like Business for Climate Action and the Climate Forum, because we need to find more ways to change how businesses create waste. It's really, really critical. David, did you want to add to that?
Not especially, but it's a nice segue into the next question, really, which I can sort of pick up on if you like. I mean,
yep.
It's been really interesting working for council for quite a while, and there are a bunch of tools we can use, from sort of regulation through to voluntary behaviour change. And I guess because Colin asked the question about discouraging people from buying so much and the challenges with capitalism, I guess the difficulty, you know, we run is that fundamentally we want people to make choices because of the information they have in it. They're making those choices. And so I guess we focus a lot of our work on giving people the tools and information to make good choices or useful choices. And I guess one of the challenges particularly is, as council, is that, you know, fundamentally the success of some of those businesses in the region are based on, you know, the way things have always been done. So I guess we want to give people opportunities to transition, but help them to make the choice themselves to do that.
I can give an example of the sort of thing as council we try to do. So op shops. We put a lot of effort into promoting op shop maps, trying to tell the story, we provide some support to op shops as well. And op shops are becoming cool. We're tipping over, and I'm not going to claim that council made op shops cool. We did our best to help, but you can see a change in behaviour patterns where buying secondhand actually is becoming cool, and that's fantastic. That's the sort of change we need, and the more people who are modelling those sorts of changes, the cooler it becomes. Kindra, you asking to speak some more about possible food waste recovery plans, right? Shall I kick off with this one, David? So first of all, Nelson City Council did a trial quite recently, as you're probably aware, about 100 households doing a food waste collection. So we contracted community compost, and we got a lot of data from that about average amount of food waste per week, behaviour patterns, and who actually wanted to do food waste collections, who didn't. And out of interest, there's also been a similar trial just done in Wellington, where they gave two cohorts of people the choice of either having a food waste collection or home composting, and then measured the results, which is really interesting too. So across local government, we're building up some really interesting information about options for recovering food waste. What we don't have is large-scale organic waste processing here in the region, although we do have some very good players who are working on this. And we were, in the Nelson City Council long-term plan, we were about to progress to looking at how to action a food waste collection. But then the government released their consultation with mandatory food waste collections. So we're just holding fire to see exactly what that's going to be, what the funding is likely to be, because they've released funding from the Climate Emergency Fund, and what opportunities that's going to offer. But food waste collections are completely going to, we're waiting for the government to confirm the outcome of the consultation, but we are expecting that's what's going to happen. There's going to be mandatory food waste collections, hopefully across the country. However, again, the emissions associated with having to rescue and process food waste are much higher than not creating it in the first place. So it's really important not to, yes, I know, Karen. So it's really important not to lose sight of all the opportunities to address why are we wasting so much food? What's happening? What are the factors? And to model how not to reduce food waste. And if I was going to ask you, the forum, to do anything, it would probably be to model those behaviours around how not to create food waste. Because between us all, we've got so much knowledge and expertise. So yes, so there we are. That's the end of my little plea about food waste. David, did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I guess it's just interesting that Wellington just released some research that they did. They did a trial with some households where they had one bunch of households where they really encouraged them to do composting, and another bunch of households where they provided them a food waste collection. And they did manage to get twice the avoidance for a collection service. So I guess whatever else, this is the challenge acting as council. You know, there's going to be a bunch of different solutions, and not everything's going to suit everyone. But and the challenge for council will be how to provide flexible services that help the people that need the help, and at the same time they're sort of cost effective. And one of the advantages of the council providing the service is that we can really get really good economies of scale. To drop the costs for some of these things. So I think that's one of the things we're going to have to work through. Sort of, I think food waste collection, it's coming, whether we like it or not, I think. And I think it's just working through that, how we provide that without encouraging extra consumption. I mean, it'd be a bit of a tragedy if people felt good about filling a food waste bin every week for collection.
I know. Okay. Kendra, did that answer your questions, or did you have anything else you wanted to ask on that?
No, I guess I'm just relieved to hear that there are bigger plans in process. And I mean, the reality is, however carefully you can shop and however carefully you cook and all the rest of it, we always generate food, food waste. And, I've been composting everything for, 35, 40 years. And, bokashi, stuff like this, worm farms, all those things are great. But yes, scaling it up is really where it needs to be at. Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more. Jack, you're asking how much supermarkets are on board. So, for example, use of own containers. And I assume we're thinking as well about things like refill stations, the sort of thing we're starting to see in more bespoke shops. Some supermarkets are more ahead than others. COVID was a real pushback on reusables in supermarkets. But I'm thinking of people like Kiri Hannafin, David, who have really tried to lead the way. So I don't think, we're not seeing supermarkets at this point. We're not getting signals that they're ready to strongly move into the reuse space, but there's so many levers that are changing how packaging is provided. We're seeing trials of products being sold without packaging. We're seeing supermarkets phasing out product bags. So supermarkets are going to be part of the change, but they're not necessarily going to be leading. They may just be being pulled along by the change that's being created around them. They have a huge amount of potential, though, to create change. David, did you want to say something on that?
Probably the interesting, I was just reading an article a few months ago where Countdown trialled some, packaging-free produce aisles. And they did actually get increased food wastage in some areas. So it's a really fascinating subject, but it's complicated sometimes. So, COVID was a real challenge and a bit of a distraction, but and they'll have their own agenda. But yeah, we're seeing a bit of progress, and certainly, with the way they're, some of the packaging is certainly improving, but there's still a long way to go.
No, but they are very open to having these conversations, is what we're hearing and seeing. So progress is possible.
One thing I could add is I think the options for reuse and refilling are improving as well, and I think there's a lot of opportunities in Nelson. So
we've there certainly are. I think Nelson's got potential to lead the way in quite a few of these spaces. It's really, really interesting. Another interesting thing with supermarkets is that if a container return scheme is introduced, it's quite possible they will become locations for returning containers. And again, sometimes you have mixed thoughts about things like container return schemes, because how do you embed reuse? How do you encourage reuse with a system that is strongly predicated on capturing and recycling? So again, many really interesting conversations in that area as well. Lindsay, you've asked about building a circular economy to generate huge amounts of material for potential reuse, but that needs demo yards on steroids. What do you mean by demo yards? Do you mean places where things can be taken? You're on mute, Lindsay.
Yeah, sorry, I was just unmuting. Hi, Karen. I was meaning if we're going to building for a circular economy, will mean that demolition materials have to be handled in a way that optimizes their potential for reuse. So there will be places that handle them, maybe recondition them or get them recertified or whatever's needed to expand their reuse. But if that facility is not available, then the system falls down, and therefore it then becomes, quotes, waste. And I'm interested to know, there's a chicken and egg problem in that it's on steroids, as I've called them, needs to be there to receive the stuff, but they're not going to do any business until this system is going. So I'm interested to know if you're aware of anything that is getting ready to get this system moving, because it'll be quite critical in the foreseeable future.
It's right. David's waving. I know he can speak to this quite comprehensively. Go, David.
So I mean, people like Habitat for Humanity are really sort of gearing up in this space, and we're keen to engage with them. I think Nelson Environment Centre as well, looking to do the same thing. Weka Pickers, they're a private company out in Motueka. They just recently applied for some funding from council, and there's a $20,000 grant to start gearing up for just that kind of facility and equipment. So there is a bit of a building interest, excuse the pun, in that area. And government signalled that funding, that's one of their funding priorities in the coming year, is building and construction waste. A lot of that should also go further back up the chain in terms of designing out as well. So
totally.
We had a really, really good success with the Motueka library. And to be honest, it was mainly the architects and the builders. We supported them a bit in measuring some of that waste, but a lot of that just happened in the way it was designed, in terms of, designing for stud heights that match sheet sizes, not ordering more prefabrication before it comes to site. So there's some really interesting stuff going on, but there's a hang of a long way to go.
David, if I might ask, minimizing waste during construction is different for the products that come out for a circular economy. So was that library building also built for good deconstruction and standard components and things like that?
Oh, look, to be honest, Lindsay, I couldn't tell you exactly, but I do know that they made some choices around that, around choosing untreated timber where they could, so that it could be reused or used as a wood later on, ditching the concrete slab and going to a timber floor instead, and using screw piles, so it's the building's actually, sitting on piles, so you can get underneath it afterwards if you need to.
And theoretically remove the piles in the end too.
Yeah, I don't know if they use that. That's right. Yeah, and don't know if they use, but there are certainly options like carpet tiles that you can reuse. You just replace the patches that are wearing out and send them back for recycling and reuse. So there's still a long way to go, because building projects are notorious for being on a tight budget and tight time frame, and often people just kind of revert to what they know best. I've talked to a couple of builders lately that are looking to do something different, but they're just really struggling to get
it is starting to happen more and more. I know that Weka Pickers have done a deconstruction in Kaiteriterri, for example, And as a council, we are planning, I think, our second deconstruction at the moment, but it is early days. I see Raymond's on in the meeting. We've been working with Raymond to start producing some resources to support diversion of building waste. And what we're trying to do is pull together a range of activities and support to engage with the building sector more in this new financial year. So that's a work in progress, but Raymond's been supporting us, helping us develop things like a directory for diverting building resources for the region, where we can pull information together and just try and take away some of those barriers.
Now, I've just had another question that popped in, Karen, that went straight to me rather than to the whole group. So I think that's Jack and Barbara there. So I think that was for the whole group, and just some questions around the gas at the landfill about whether that extra gas can be used. Mm-hmm. So the question was, could the extra gas not used by the hospital be containerised and sold to compete with natural gas on the market? That's certainly something that the business unit are looking at. Possibly that, but because it's essentially like, it's methane, so it's like natural gas. It takes a lot of compression and quite heavy cylinders for that type of thing. So that could be one option, would be bottling the gas and using it, but there'll be plenty of other options for using that energy, and the business unit are pretty actively looking at options at the moment. So watch the space.
I see, John Paul, your question about, you're quite right. The idea behind product stewardship is to actually make the cost of disposing, recovering and disposing, or capturing an item, the responsibility of the manufacturer. And the hope behind that is that it's also going to prompt design for reuse rather than the linear make, take, waste model. So again, it's part of the thinking behind the circular economy. So your question is, what's being done?
Yeah. We're seeing a lot of progress, aren't we, Karen?
We are seeing quite a lot of progress. Yes, you're talking about using materials, less damaging materials. Yeah, we're seeing a huge amount of progress in this space, although it's also really complicated because, for example, many manufacturers are moving to compostable packaging. And as you probably all know, that is not a straightforward proposition in terms of environmental outcomes. We don't have national standards for compost here in New Zealand, as far as I'm aware. And in the meantime, a growing understanding of the different chemicals in compostable products means that they may not be suitable to compost, either industrially or at home. So there's an awful lot of painful learning going on for many businesses around what is actually genuinely sustainable and what's greenwashing.
Yeah, there's a lot of work on the product stewardship side. I'm involved in designing the scheme for the e-waste nationally, and yeah, that's we trying very hard to make sure that the focus is on pushing back on manufacturers so that the products are better quality, so they last longer and are easier to take apart and repair. And the whole right to repair is really important as well. But it's a massively long process that's not going very fast, unfortunately.
It was a really interesting and I thought sort of valuable sort of little piece of research that Consumer NZ did on, they repair, which is interesting. We are actually seeing these conversations sort of getting a bit wider in the community, which is really good. It's, I'm sort of quite encouraged by that. We are seeing a bit of progress on product stewardship. So tyres are the first one that have come over the line. So by next year, everyone that brings tyres into the country will pay extra money to a not-for-profit, and that not-for-profit organisation will be responsible for taking those tyres at the end of their life and dealing with them. And there's a bunch of other products on the list, if you like. One of the ones that sort of relates directly to climate is greenhouse gas and refrigerants. So very soon there'll be, a process where all refrigerant gases coming into the country will be managed by an organisation, and there'll be, financial incentives to capture that gas and avoid avoid the release. So, you know, it's progress. It's always slower than you want it to be, although, to be fair, the government's been moving really quickly lately, and we've been almost saying, whoa, slow down a bit, because it's change is pretty difficult too.
May I offer a quick comment that may be useful for talking with manufacturers?
Please.
I've been a couple of times to what's known as the Cradle to Cradle Congress near Hamburg in Germany, and they call themselves the cradle of the cradle to cradle. That's where it started. And a recurring thing that comes out from manufacturers is when they commit to the process of gearing themselves to produce products for a circular economy, two remarkable things came out. One was that those were the teams that everybody in the company wanted to join. And the second one was they said they learned so much about their own products in the process of it. So I just want to share those with you. I thought they were really striking outcomes. Thank you.
They are. James Griffin of the Sustainable Business Network has been doing a lot of work in this space as well. So yeah, I mean, so many interesting conversations you can have. And
one of the things I'd just like to throw in too, like one of the probably one of the last points in the last slide there, is that actually a bunch of consumers can actually make a difference. Tragically, I called a rinse aid for the dishwasher, and I looked at the bottom, and it had a recycling triangle, but it didn't have a number in it. I was like, oh dear, we can't recycle this. So tragically, I rang them up. It's just Joe Jog's consumer, not such and such council officer, and just sort of talked to them. And I couldn't believe it. 6 months later, they'd changed the product and had a big triangle on the bottom. So, I think sometimes people sort of underestimate, what difference they can make by talking to manufacturers and producers. And,
yes, I had quite a vigorous conversation with What Is yesterday in the same vein.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, yeah. So Gillian, you suggested a recipe book, and Lisa has answered the question already. Love Food, Hate Waste have some fantastic leftover recipes. They have invested so much energy and resource in creating great recipes, tips, education. So I can't recommend highly enough the Love Food, Hate Waste NZ website for anybody who wants to find good recipes, good ideas, or share them with others. Right down to little booklets called Seasonal Kai, I think they are, which does shopping lists for food in season. So there's one for summer, autumn, winter, and spring, full of recipes, full of shopping lists. They're great resources, they really are. Lindsay, you've asked how good is home composting from a methane perspective. Right, I am not an expert in this space. I don't think it's as good as other processes unless you are a really good composter. It's one of the reasons we run composting 101 workshops. Sorry, that background movement was my cup of tea arriving. So I would really recommend talking to the people in our region who are specialists in this.
Yeah. Composting done badly can be bad. You can get a bit of fugitive. If you don't keep it aerobic, you can get methane from a compost heap. So it's one of those things that, sometimes everything's a little bit complicated. And so, good composting's great and bad composting's not wonderful.
Nadine, I love that.
But basically, composting isn't the answer.
Oh, it can be. There's a range of solutions. Yeah. The point is there isn't one silver bullet in all of this. It would be fantastic to think we could come up with one smooth, homogeneous, perfect solution for each problem. But it never works like that. Nadine, you suggested food scraps is really helpful. I agree.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, totally agree.
And I'm trying to change my language, the way I talk about these things, talking about resource management rather than waste management. So yeah, that's a bit of a mind shift, but you've still got to, that's a great idea.
One of the things we'd really like to do is some research into how food waste happens. How does food end up being food scraps? Yes, totally agree, Kendra, about the Earthshot book. It is very good. Don, what can be done about food wastes? Hailcloth, wind shelters, weed mats, product packaging. That's a huge question. There are schemes for certain types of food associated waste. David, you might have more to say about that than me.
Yeah, government's so the government nominated, I think it was 6 priority products for product stewardship, and agricultural plastics was part of that. That one's a little bit quiet at the moment. I think it's one of the big gnarly ones, which they haven't quite, they haven't made as much progress on that. But in terms of the food waste, that's something we are talking in the sort of regional council part of our council around, good practice for some of that. And I think if we do some work with, we had an interesting inquiry a couple of days ago, for instance, someone had 24 tons of rancid Brazil nuts, wondering what to do with them. So there's some really interesting challenges with food processing industry, and I think if and when the 2 councils start working on some residential food processing processes, we'll need to think about the sort of commercial food waste, food scrap side of things, and also the food production. So yeah, it's a bit bigger than being heard on, but it's something that's on our radar.
There's also voluntary product stewardship schemes like Plasback and so on. The industry is trying to find some solutions to this as well. And the Prime Minister's science advisor is leading a major project on food waste as well. Nadine's just popped the link in chat if anybody's interested, because the first report is out and it's hugely interesting.
Yeah, and Karen, we were talking about potentially getting her to do a presentation or do a talk.
Yes, seeing as they're happening elsewhere, yes, it could be a really good thing to do. And then we've also got businesses who lead by example. And so again, never underestimate the value of taking action. So for example, Nelson Hospital, I know Lisa's here, have now started recovering all the batteries. Now, the hospital is a huge user of batteries. And to actually put the effort and resource into capturing all the batteries they use and making sure they're recycled is fantastic. And it's a great example of a business taking leadership. Lisa, I don't know if you want to say anything about what the hospital is doing now that I've gone and stolen your thunder.
Maybe while Lisa's just thinking about that, I think sort of space now, I don't know what you think, Karen, if anyone else has got any questions, I'd rather just ask rather than put them in the chat. So I'm very happy to take any more questions.
Yeah, I agree. I had on your pie chart, Karen, you talked about C&D being just 7%. I presume a lot of the commercial waste would actually have been C&D. Is that right?
So the swap analysis is a very blunt tool.
Yeah.
The categories, it's a standard procedure used across the country for consistency, but it's not a thing of complete delicacy when it comes to identifying types of waste. But David, you've got some thoughts about percentage of C&D?
Yeah, I've dug into this a little bit lately. It's a little bit hard to lock down because it relies on people coding things correctly, but commercial waste, from just business as usual businesses is still a really large part of the waste problem. I think we probably see those skips a lot, and there's certainly a good proportion of the waste is coming in skips off building sites, but there's still a massive amount of business as usual business waste: cardboard, wooden pallets, plastic sheeting, paper, food waste and all sorts. And so Karen talked about a lot of that commercial waste going direct to landfill. Well, once you start heading out into Tasman District, a lot of that commercial waste comes through our transfer stations, our RRCs. So if you stand at Richmond and watch one of those large front-loading waste vehicles unloading, this is the skip that's out the back of a printing shop, or an engineering workshop, or a food producer, and there's still a lot of general waste. I guess it's a bit tragic standing there and looking at it, but there's still a long way to go, and just that business as usual. And I guess one of the really big challenges is that, you know, the prices of waste have been going up over the last, you know, 3 years, but people are still making the choice to put it in the skip, and it's trying to find that fine line between helping those businesses make different choices, and that's certainly our preference, is that people make a better choice. But there's, yeah, so to come back to your question, so C&D waste, it's probably more like 9 or 10%, but I'm not sure that it's bigger than that, but it's certainly a really visible part of the waste stream.
Yes.
In Auckland, they reckon it's like 50%. The data they've collected. So,
well, we're certainly we've been having some energetic conversations about it lately, so we're quite keen to sort of try and nail that number, actually.
Okay, well, Karen, have you got anything else?
No, I mean, hopefully we've covered a reasonably broad range of what's involved with waste, and very happy to take questions. If anybody thinks of questions afterwards, then really happy to have them emailed to us and see if we can get you answers.
May I just skip back to a question I put in chat that I think was jumped over? And that is it possible to get the data from your food waste trials that you talked about, Karen?
Oh, sorry, I missed that, Lindsay. I don't know is the answer. It may still be being used for planning and potential commercial relationships or whatever. I'll check and find out.
Thank you.
And Gillian, you've just mentioned about food scraps going in the green bin with garden scraps. Now, again, David's knowledge will be better than mine on this, but my understanding is that the processing of garden waste is quite different from food waste. And when you mix the two together, it becomes a much more expensive process. But David, do you want to speak to that?
Pretty much it. That's what I understand too. That so when you're doing garden waste, you can do windrow composting, which we will see if you're down on the cycle trail, green waste to zero. So that's your traditional windrow, chip it up, put it in a long pile, turn it over. So that's quite straightforward. Once you start putting food waste in, you need to be, as Christchurch have found, a lot more careful with odour and temperature and that type of thing. So the sort of debate / question is, if you provide a food waste collection, are you better off to keep that as a separate, a food scraps collection, Nadine? Do you keep that separate for processing in a smaller contained vessel with sort of much stricter quality control, and keep your garden green waste separate, because you can process it a lot more easily, because if you mix them together, you have to treat them all as if they're food waste, and that becomes quite expensive.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for your input. Thank you, David and Karen, for great presentation, and yeah, it was really good. If anyone's got any questions that they've yet to ask, then please you can send them through to me, and I'll pop up my address in a minute, or send them through to the forum, and I'll pass them on to David and Karen.
One thing I forgot to mention, actually, we are working together and we are reviewing the waste plan for the council. So that's we're doing some background work.
Oh, good point, David. Yes. Yeah,
we're doing a lot of data gathering and questions at the moment, looking at trying to define the problem as well as we can. Look at what we think we're going to need to do in the future, and that's some sort of back of the office work over the next 3 or 4 months, and then probably in the new year, Karen, that we'll be working on starting some public engagement. Would that be the sort of timeline we're looking at?
Yeah, we've got a most inconvenient election in the middle of all of this. So remember, people, local elections, please do get involved. But we're thinking probably doing early engagement, sort of pre-engagement around what a reviewed waste plan could look like. It's probably most likely to be sort of January, February onwards, depending on what timing our council approves. The waste plan has to be reviewed. It's a mandatory requirement at least every 6 years. We're trying to do ours a little bit earlier this time because there's so much interesting new legislation coming out. And we really want to be able to integrate that better with our long-term plan. So we're aiming, if possible, to have the waste plan review really well underway by very early next year.
Yeah, so there'll be some big questions like, should we, or we may have to provide a food waste collection, for instance, and how do we get involved in processing that material? Finding out what's going to happen with recycling and the container deposits. So there's some really big decisions over the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and obviously we've got a central government election next year as well, so that's going to throw another big rock in the way as well, possibly.
Oh, these are all interesting times, and there's so much happening. So
it's
a good time to be involved in waste. Yeah,
it had to come at some stage, didn't it? Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. I just would like to, I'd just like to do a quick karakia to close the session with, and I won't put it on the screen. Oh yeah, maybe I will put it on the screen, and then because it's got my email address afterwards. And so kia whakaria te tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia turuki whakataha ai, kia turuki whakataha ai, haumie, huie, taikie. And thank you very much, everybody. There's my email there if you want to drop it down, but I'm sure you can get hold of me somehow. So cheers. Have a good rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you.